Have you ever had a moment where, for just a few seconds, the world seemed to test your very being? Naomi Greene, a successful black female CEO, just wanted to get home after a long day. But as soon as she boarded the plane, her seat, the seat she paid for, the seat she deserved, was taken by a white passenger. No permission, no explanation, no respect. And in that moment, Naomi had to choose stay silent to avoid trouble, or stand up, not only for herself, but also for those who had been looked down upon, if it were you. Amidst the judgmental gazes of the entire cabin, what would you do? Would you be calm enough to maintain your dignity, or would your anger take you away? What Naomi chose that day brought the entire flight to a halt in less than 10 seconds. But the real reason behind that pause had more to do with the chair. It had to do with the past, with pride, with pain that many people never get to talk about. Are you willing to come with me to hear the story that has stopped the hearts of millions of Americans? If you are ready, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to join this deeply emotional journey. That morning, the Texas sky opened up in a soft, misty blue. The first rays of sunlight fell on the giant glass panels of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, reflecting countless small streaks of light dancing on the stone floor. People walked hurriedly. The sound of suitcases pulling each other created long, regular sound lines. The air smelled of hot coffee, mixed with the luxurious perfume of passengers preparing for their first business trip of the week. Dr. Naomi Greene, the first black female CEO of the aircraft security technology company, Secure Sky Systems, stood in the middle of the crowd. She looked calm, but her deep eyes and short breaths betrayed the turmoil inside her. This was no ordinary morning. She had more than just a meeting to get to Chicago. She was in a race against time, a race that could affect the lives of thousands. Naomi tugged at the digital watch on her wrist. The second hand ticked so fast that her heart raced. She had exactly 90 minutes to get on the plane, to Chicago, and to the FAA dispatch room. Only 90 minutes, and the danger was growing by the minute. The encrypted phone in her pocket vibrated. Naomi pulled it out and touched the screen. The voice of Elliot Ward, her chief engineer and the person she trusted most, rang through the slight static of the secure channel. Naomi, we lost 2 more planes. Navigation signal is off by more than 5 miles. Jamming frequency is increasing. Naomi stopped. Around her, people continued to move, oblivious to the growing danger in the skies above America. She asked, her voice low and extremely calm, "How many socks in all 8 already?" "And it's spreading." Naomi closed her eyes for a few seconds. Her heart was beating very fast under her thin coat, but her face remained calm, causing Elliot on the other side to automatically slow down his breathing. Naomi said, "I'm on the 1470. Get to Chicago by 10:30. Hold the system for me. At least 30 minutes. Elliot replied softly, "I'll do my best. But Naomi, if things get worse." "I know." She ended the call, drawing a deep breath. No one at the airport knew that a petite woman in a long caramel brown coat was carrying a story bigger than a flight. But Naomi was used to that. All her life she had been used to feeling like she had to work twice as hard to get half as much credit. She walked faster, through the crowd to gate C-17, where the flight to Chicago was about to board. She had only one goal in mind: to board the plane on time, about 20 steps from the gate. Naomi readjusted her bag. She pulled out her boarding pass and glanced at the word Seat 10, first class, an expensive option she didn't like, but she had to use it to have enough space to work and receive urgent data from the FAA during the flight. Up ahead, first-class passengers began boarding. Naomi picked up the pace, taking long, steady steps. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her breathing steady. She stepped into the cabin, where the soft yellow lighting made everything look sophisticated. Naomi looked for Seat 1A, the seat she had reserved. But as soon as she saw the first row, she stopped. A white woman, in her early 50s, was sitting comfortably in her place. The woman was wearing an expensive coat and holding a glass of rosé, even though the plane had not yet taken off. Her hair was up in a puff, her lips painted a deep red. She was talking loudly to the man with her, apparently her husband, causing some nearby passengers to glance at her in annoyance. Naomi looked at the name tag on their suitcases. Victoria Hale? Naomi kept a polite smile. "Sorry, I think you're sitting in the wrong seat. 1A is mine. Victoria turned her head, her eyes scanning Naomi up and down as if assessing the value of an item. Then she laughed, a small but sharp laugh. Oh, sweetheart, first class isn't for everyone. Maybe you're lost. Naomi clenched her hands on the edge of her chair slightly, but her voice remained calm. I'm not lost. This is my boarding pass. Victoria waved her hand, as if chasing away a gentle breeze. That's funny. This chair costs more than your rent. Are you sure? The words hit Naomi like a familiar knife. Over the years, such words no longer surprised her, but they still made her feel a pang in her chest. There were some kinds of discrimination that didn't need to be shouted, just soft enough but sharp enough to cut into the heart. Before Naomi could reply, the man with her, Daniel Hale, spoke softly. Vicky, don't be like that. Victoria glared Daniel. Can you be quiet? Naomi took a deep breath. This was no time for pride. Every minute she lost arguing, hundreds of people out there were at risk. She was about to say more when a young flight attendant walked up, smiling. Do you need any help? Naomi showed her card and spoke. I think there's been a mistake. This seat is mine. The flight attendant looked at the boarding pass, then at Victoria. Madam, this seat belongs to the guest over here, Victoria interrupted, speaking so loudly that several passengers turned to look. I'm already sitting. She should sit somewhere else. Don't make a fuss. Victoria's voice was sharp. If the plane is delayed because of her, I will sue the airline. Naomi glanced at her watch then. 9:07 a.m. She remembered Elliot's voice trembling slightly over the phone. The navigation system was getting more and more off. Each passing minute was squeezing her like a rope. At that moment, the most painful thing was not the chair being stolen. It was the feeling that she was being forced into a choice that black women often face. Either protect her dignity, cause a scene, or swallow it to keep the peace for others. Naomi swallowed. She smiled, a smile no one could understand the depth behind it. She said softly, very softly, It's okay. I'll sit somewhere else. Victoria laughed triumphantly. Good girl. Just 3 words. But like a lock, it closed some part of Naomi's dignity. She walked quietly to the back, finding a vacant seat for the time being. Her hand shook slightly as she held the phone. Elliot called again, more urgently than before. Naomi, we just lost signal on 3 more planes. We're counting minutes. Naomi closed her eyes. Deep down, part of her blamed herself for backing down. Another part tried to maintain the composure she had honed over the past 20 years. But at that moment, a thought flashed like a torch in the darkness. Maybe. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The plane door closed. Naomi opened her eyes. A decision was forming in her heart, and in just a few minutes, the whole world would know about that decision. In the moment when the soft yellow light in the cabin bathed Naomi's soft curly hair, one could see an unusual calmness in her. But that calmness did not come naturally. It was forged over many years, from the scratches of the past, from the pain she had swallowed to keep going. Naomi grew up in a small corner of Birmingham, Alabama, where the streets were quiet at night and family-run restaurants opened early to serve the morning shift workers. Her mother, Linda Greene, was a nurse at the local hospital. Her father, Mark Greene, was a mechanic, a quiet, gentle man who worked with calloused hands. They weren't wealthy, but the small house was filled with love and laughter, except when Mom came home late from a long shift. From a young age, Naomi learned what it was like to be looked down upon without anyone having to say a word. The looks, the whispers she thought she couldn't hear. At school, she was one of the few black students in her class. She scored high on tests, but praise was rare. She still clearly remembered the afternoon when she was 12. It was hotter than usual, the ceiling fan whirring in the classroom. She handed in her science test with unusual confidence, but when the teacher returned the paper, she only glanced at her before saying to the attentive class, Naomi, "You did well on your test, but are you sure you didn't copy?" The whole class burst into laughter. Naomi clenched her notebook and bowed her head low. When the laughter subsided, she had time to swallow her tears. That evening, she sat silently by the window. The wind blew in from outside, carrying the smell of the earth after the rain and the sound of crickets. Her mother walked in, put her hand on her shoulder. and said softly, "You don't need them to see you're good. You just need to keep going on your path. One day, they'll have to look back." It was the first time Naomi understood that true strength lies not in reacting immediately. It lies in persevering. Years later, when she was accepted into Harvard School of Engineering on a full scholarship, her neighbors and even some of her former teachers were surprised. No one said it out loud, but Naomi understood. In their eyes, the opportunity seemed beyond the reach of a child growing up in a working-class Alabama neighborhood. At Harvard, Naomi was the only black girl in her freshman aerospace technology class. The students around her came from influential families and had access to technology from a young age. She had only an old laptop that hummed when she opened the simulation software. But Naomi never let that stop her. She joined the lab in her freshman year, taking on low-key jobs like proofreading code for a flight simulation project. Every night, while her friends were out partying, she would stay in the lab until 2 or 3 in the morning. No one saw, but she did it. No one noticed, but she didn't quit. There were winter nights when it was snowing heavily. She would sit by the dormitory window and look at the endless gray sky. The question would ring in her head, "Am I going in the right direction?" But then her mother's voice would come back to her. "You just need to continue on your path." Naomi continued walking, one step at a time. After graduating, she was recruited to work at a NASA research center. It was her first time standing in a conference room full of white men. And when she presented her first proposal, one of them said bitterly, "That's a good idea. I wonder who wrote it for you." The room fell silent for a few seconds before moving on to other topics, leaving Naomi sitting still, her hands clasped on the edge of her chair. She didn't react. She didn't argue. But inside, a fire burned, a fire that would take her further than anyone could imagine. Years later, as CEO of Secure Sky Systems, she changed the entire national aviation safety standard with new navigation algorithms that reduced the risk of navigation errors by more than 30%. She went from being a suspicious Alabama girl in her classroom to one of the people who keep America's skies safe. But now, as she sat in a plane full of strangers, with a passenger stealing her seat and hurling vicious insults at her, it all came flooding back. Not to make her weak, but to remind her that she had lived through worse, and she had come out on top. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the old wooden table where she had studied as a child. She remembered her father's calloused hands, resting on her shoulders when she felt discouraged. She remembered her mother's eyes when she told her that her path would never be easy, but it would always be worth it. The sound of the plane hovering below made Naomi open her eyes. Her heart was racing, but her breathing was steady. Despite the humiliation, despite the awkwardness of being pushed back into an uncomfortable seat, Naomi felt one thing clearly: she was no longer the 12-year-old girl who had been wrongly accused. She was grown, she was strong, and it's time to prove it again. While Victoria was sitting in seat 1A, Naomi received a second call from Elliot. His voice was trembling slightly, sounding like he was about to cry from worry. "Naomi, the signal is getting worse fast. If you don't get to Chicago by 10:30, Naomi said only one sentence. "I will come, I promise." But as she said that, she knew things were going off plan. She looked up at the ceiling lights. The light fell on her face, highlighting the stillness in her eyes. But behind the stillness, a storm was brewing. And she knew, in just a few minutes, she would have to make a decision that could change the course of the entire flight, and possibly the fates of thousands of people out there. Naomi placed her hand on her chest, feeling her heart pounding, then said to herself, "I've come too far to stop for a chair." In the far corner, Victoria was still laughing loudly, not knowing that the real storm was not coming from her, but from the woman she had just offended, the woman who was about to change everything. No one could have guessed that. In the middle of that seemingly peaceful morning, there was an invisible string that was tying every minute, every second of thousands of people to the choice of a woman. And at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, everything continued as it was, completely unaware of the approaching storm. Naomi stepped down from the first-class cabin, trying to find a temporary seat in the back row. The space around her was filled with familiar sounds, passengers whispering, the sound of the cabin door closing, the flight attendants speaking softly but firmly. All those sounds made Naomi suddenly remember the times she went on long business trips, the overnight flights, the tired mornings, but still had to smile at her employees and partners. That was the life of a CEO, not as glamorous as people think. She sat down on a seat near the back of the cabin and pulled her seatbelt gently. The light from the window fell on her face, highlighting the coldness in her eyes. Naomi silently observed the passengers beside her, a young woman reading a book, an old man unwrapping a pack of mints, a man occasionally glancing at his expensive watch as if afraid he would be late for a meeting. It was all normal. Too normal. But for Naomi, the minutes ticked by like the hands of a clock in her lap, heavy and pressing. She put her hand to her phone. Security messages flashed and disappeared so quickly that anyone else would have thought they were just a glitch. But Naomi knew exactly what they said. The numbers, the signals, the constant updates from the Chicago System Center suggested the problem was spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. Elliot left a hasty message. Naomi, GPS signal is off 20 miles on Flight 623. We don't have much time. She felt a knot in her stomach, a dull ache. Responsibility always weighed heavily, but today it felt like a stone pressing down on her chest. If she had been a few minutes slower, things could have spiraled out of control. Naomi's mind was filled with the familiar question, can I turn this around in time? She knew people like Elliot were counting on her. The pilots out there were counting on them, and the hundreds of families waiting for their loved ones to return safely. But at that moment, the image of Victoria sitting smugly in row 1A suddenly appeared. It was just a small image, but it made Naomi feel the feeling she had tried to bury for so many years, the pain of being looked down upon because of her skin color, because of her gender, because of all the things that had nothing to do with her ability. She took a deep breath. The airport, the plane, the flight attendants, the passengers. Everything was wrapped in a false sense of calm. Little did they know that at this very moment, a potentially catastrophic event was unfolding just a few thousand feet above the clouds. And the person who could have prevented it was sitting in the back seat. Not because she was late, but because a selfish passenger thought she wasn't classy enough to sit in first class. Beside Naomi, the young woman looked up from her book, smiling kindly. You look tired. Do you need any help? Naomi shook her head gently. No, thank you. Maybe if she told the truth, that 8 planes were in danger and she had to be at the dispatch center in less than 2 hours, the woman would think she was joking, or worse, panic. No, Naomi knew she was on her own, as usual. While the plane was boarding, Naomi noticed that passengers from different cabins were still boarding regularly. Among the crowd was a young couple with 2 small children. The boy, about 7 years old, was hugging a brown teddy bear tightly, his face anxious as if he was afraid of getting lost. Naomi watched the scene and felt her heart soften. She had always had a soft spot for children. Every time she saw a happy family like that, she remembered the years when her family had saved every penny to send her to college, to give her a future they never dared to dream of. That brief moment made Naomi feel even more strongly the responsibility on her shoulders. The planes that were having problems were not just vehicles. On each flight were people, children, parents, people trying to get home. A few rows ahead, Naomi heard Victoria laugh. It was a sarcastic laugh, like someone telling a story that only they found amusing. Naomi tried not to care, but the sound cut through her nerves. She felt her heart rate increase slightly, irritation seeping through the calm she had tried to maintain. The flight attendant came down to the cabin, guiding the passengers to put their luggage and find their seats. She glanced at Naomi with a bit of concern, perhaps because she had witnessed the scene earlier. Naomi smiled to reassure her, but the flight attendant's eyes still showed a hint of awkwardness. Time passed so slowly that Naomi felt like the clock hands were melting in the air. She looked at her watch for the 10th time since sitting down. 9:14 a.m. The phone vibrated. A message from Elliot. Naomi, Flight 247 is experiencing data imbalance. This is a critical signal. We cannot wait. Naomi closed her eyes. She could feel everything around her shrinking, leaving only her and her responsibility. In that moment, she realized she couldn't sit still any longer. She couldn't wait for the plane to take off before heading to Chicago. She couldn't let someone like Victoria delay her with her senseless arrogance. She couldn't let thousands of lives depend on her patience. She opened her eyes, lifted her head, and for what felt like the first time in minutes, she could see clearly everything in front of her. The light, the sounds, the space. Everything seemed to be calling her to stand up. It's time. Naomi unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, shifting slightly so as not to disturb the passenger next to her. The young woman asked in surprise, "Are you okay?" Naomi nodded. "I need to go up a bit." She walked up the aisle, each step filled with determination. There was no wavering in her heart. Prejudice could take away her seat, but it could not take away her rights and duties at this moment. It could not take away the responsibility of someone who held the safety of the sky in her hands. As Naomi entered the first class, many eyes were on her. Victoria saw her approaching and frowned as if to say, "What do you want?" But Naomi did not stop in front of Victoria. She walked straight to the chief stewardess. Her voice was calm but sharp, like a command sharpened by the fire of pressure. "I need to see the captain. Now!" And that was the moment something big was about to begin. Naomi stood in front of the yellow light of the first-class cabin, her hands resting lightly on the armrests, as if she was holding on to the last of her composure. She looked towards the chief flight attendant, a woman named Marlene, around 40 years old. Her eyes sharp, but with a hint of fatigue of someone who had worked for many years. Marlene was startled when Naomi said she wanted to see the captain. It was not a common request from a passenger. And there was something in Naomi's voice that could not be ignored, Marlene asked softly, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. "Ma'am, can you tell me the reason the captain is in the process of preparing for takeoff? We only allow access when absolutely necessary." Naomi opened her mouth to speak, but Victoria interrupted, her voice low and annoyed. "What is this? Is she trying to attract attention again? I guess she's not used to first class and is trying to cause drama. She should go back to her seat." Many eyes turned to Victoria, then to Naomi. Some passengers looked confused, but Victoria looked amused, as if she were watching a comedy in which she was the main character. Daniel, the husband sitting next to her, reached out and gently pulled on his wife's sleeve and whispered, "Vicky, stop. Haven't you seen how serious she is?" But Victoria withdrew her hand and tossed her head, completely ignoring her husband's words. "Daniel, don't be a hero. She's bothering me. This is my flight. I paid for this seat. She didn't." Naomi kept her eyes calm, but a chill began to creep down her spine, not from fear, but from the realization that if she let Victoria continue, things would go further. And Naomi had no time to argue with someone steeped in privilege and arrogance. She turned back to look at Marlene, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "I need to see the captain immediately. If you need proof, I will." Victoria burst out laughing, as if she had heard the dumbest joke of the day. "What do you prove, that you don't know where to sit, or that you think you have the right to give orders in this cabin?" Naomi closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. Her gaze softened, but there was steel in them, not water. Not a right. It's a responsibility. Victoria snapped her fingers in the air, feigning surprise. Responsibility. "Oh, honey, first class is a place to relax, not a place for you to play secret agent. If you want to play hero, do it somewhere else." Several passengers in the back began to stir. Some shifted their positions and craned their necks to see what was going on. Marlene looked at Naomi for a moment longer than usual. Perhaps her professional instincts told her something was very real. But before she could say more, Victoria interrupted, her voice full of venom. "Who do you think you are? A regular passenger demanding to see the captain. That's ridiculous. I'm already sitting in that seat. You have no right to disrupt the entire flight because of your little wounded ego." Naomi heard every word clearly, but this time, her heart did not waver as it had when she first boarded the plane. Years of growing up surrounded by similar words had taught her to stand firm. Not in anger, not in instinct, but in absolute stillness. "I have information about an ongoing aviation security incident," she told Marlene. "I need to see the captain immediately." This time, Naomi's voice was low, deep, and so decisive that it made Marlene freeze for a moment. Victoria laughed again, but this time her laughter was drier. "Airplane accident. What are you imagining? You've been watching too many movies." Naomi looked Victoria straight in the eye. It wasn't a look of hatred. It wasn't a look of anger. It was the look of someone who had overcome a lot of pain to get where she was today. A look that anyone with depth would immediately recognize the truth. She spoke slowly, enunciating each word. I am not imagining things. I am talking about the safety of the people in the sky. And ours. Victoria opened her mouth to say something, but this time Naomi didn't give her the chance. She pulled a card from her coat pocket. It was a stiff, black card with a silver border and a small Federal Aviation Emergency Authority logo. When the cabin light hit its surface, a hologram appeared, proving that it was not something that could be bought or counterfeited. The cabin was silent. Everything seemed frozen for a few seconds. Marlene stared at the card, took a step forward, her voice trembling slightly. You are. Naomi nodded. I'm in charge of coordinating the Eastern Regional Aviation Security System, and I don't have time. Marlene put her hand to her mouth, trying to keep calm. I'll call the captain right away. Victoria sat there frozen for nearly 3 seconds before she jumped up as if electrocuted. No, impossible. This is a joke. She can't be. Daniel put his hand on his wife's shoulder, his voice weary as if he were letting go of a secret he had been trying to hide for years. Vicky, look at her. She's not the type to joke around. Victoria took a half step back, her face pale. Her eyes wavered between Naomi and the card, as if trying to find a reason to deny what was happening. But that card was real, and the truth was undeniable. Naomi stopped looking at Victoria. She turned to Marlene. I need to get to the cockpit in 2 minutes. Otherwise, we won't stand a chance. Marlene nodded, then quickly walked towards the cockpit door, calling over the intercom. The captain heard the word emergency authority and opened the door, something that normally only happened in extremely special circumstances. And Naomi stood there, as calm as ever. No pride, no claim to credit, only responsibility. But behind her, Victoria began to tremble, her lips pressing together. For the first time that morning, she realized that her voice no longer carried any weight, and that the woman she called good girl actually held the fate of everyone on the flight in her hands. As Naomi stepped forward, the passenger compartment fell silent. Everyone was drawn into a vortex of silence, where all eyes followed her back. A straight, determined back, small but carrying more weight than anyone could have imagined. And up ahead, the cockpit door opened, the interior light spilling onto the floor, as if opening a whole new chapter of the flight. A chapter that no one expected. The cockpit door opened slowly. The white light from the control system fell on Naomi's face, causing her eyes to shine with unmistakable determination. Captain Harris, a man in his 50s, with a determined but somewhat tired face, looked at Naomi with wary eyes. Harris asked immediately, without beating around the bush, "Are you from the authority?" Naomi held up the card, letting the light sweep across the hologram once more. "I am Naomi Greene. I have been assigned Emergency Coordination Authority for the East and Central regions, and I need to speak to you immediately." The co-pilot, First Officer Miller, a younger woman, frowned at the radar screen, then glanced at Naomi in agitation. "What's going on? We didn't get any warnings from the center." Naomi stepped in, the cockpit door closing behind her, muffling the chatter of the passengers. She placed her hand on the empty seat behind the two pilots, like a doctor preparing to discuss a complicated surgery. "I'll be blunt. The northbound and midbound navigation systems are experiencing widespread signal interference. 4 planes have recorded GPS deviations. 2 are experiencing fluctuation data loss, and Flight 623, Naomi paused, looking Captain Harris straight in the eye, is at risk of being next. Captain Harris gripped the edge of his chair. "Are you sure I got the report directly from the center? The signal was encrypted. I checked it 3 times. Miller quickly tapped the screen, checking the readings. "I still don't see any warnings. There's no way the system could be this slow." Naomi shook her head. "The planes are getting jammed in clusters at different times. You may not be in the zone yet, but it will come. And I can't let Flight 623 take off like this." The cockpit fell into a heavy silence. No laughter, no disbelief, just the truth. Captain Harris looked at Naomi with a mixture of respect and encouragement. "If you're right, this is a top-level situation. What do you need us to do?" Naomi took a deep breath. She felt the tension in her chest, but her voice remained perfectly controlled. "Ground the flight. Immediately." Miller was a little startled. "We're almost done boarding, and a sudden grounding would have a big impact." Captain Harris interrupted her, his voice low but firm. "Miller, if authority says grounding, we ground." Then he turned to Naomi. "I need a reason to report to the control tower. Can you give me the hard data?" Naomi opened her phone and accessed the highest security level. The screen displayed codes, signal maps, and red alerts scattered across the eastern flight path. Harris stared at the screen, his face pale. Miller stepped closer, and when she saw the signal and interference map, she lowered her voice. "Oh my God, if we take off in the next 20 minutes, the system might become unstable." Naomi nodded. "That's why I needed to see you." Harris turned on the intercom, his voice calm but urgent. "Ground operations. This is Flight 623. I request an emergency delay. Hold the plane in position. Reason risk of unconfirmed navigational instability." Naomi stood nearby, hearing the ground staff's surprised voice. "Flight 623 confirm you are cleared to take off in 18 minutes. Captain Harris glanced at Naomi. "We are canceling takeoff clearance, requesting grounding confirmation." There was silence for a few seconds. Then the ground voice became more serious. "Flight 623 grounding acknowledged. Hold position." In that moment, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders, as if a heavy chain of responsibility had been removed. But she knew this was only the beginning. There were many other planes flying in the sky. She turned to Miller. "I need to use the radio to contact the Chicago headquarters, and I need you to make the announcement to the passengers clearly, but without causing panic." Captain Harris nodded. "I'll let you use the auxiliary radio. As for the passengers, I have a plan." Naomi heard that genuine sound trust, a trust that came not from her color, or her gender, or the title written on the seat, but from her ability. Harris turned on the intercom, his voice echoing throughout the cabin. "Dear passengers, due to technical reasons related to flight safety, this flight will be temporarily delayed. Please remain in your seats and cooperate with the crew. We will update as soon as we have new information." A murmur arose in the cabin. Some looked annoyed. Others looked around, unsure of what was happening. And in the first-class row, Victoria turned to face the cabin door, her eyes filled with confusion. Daniel looked at his wife and said in a low voice, "See." She wasn't joking. Victoria didn't reply. For the first time since meeting Naomi, she couldn't find a word to defend or attack. In the cockpit, Naomi began operating the radio, her voice so professional that Miller glanced at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Chicago Center. This is Greene. I'm on Flight 623. There's increased interference in Area 14B. I've requested grounding." The Chicago Center voice answered immediately. "Clear and fast, Greene. We are receiving reports from 3 neighboring areas. The imbalance signal is spreading more widely than expected. We need you at the center within 90 minutes. Naomi looked up at Harris. "I need to get off the plane as soon as possible." Harris nodded. "I'll ask for the mobile stairs and open the doors. But you know the passengers will wonder," Naomi said in a low voice. "I will explain after we get off the plane. Now we have to act." Just as Naomi was about to leave the cockpit, Harris called her back. "Greene, thank you. Not everyone has the courage to come up here, especially in a situation like this." Naomi looked at him, giving him a small but grateful smile. "I just do what I have to do." As she opened the cockpit door and stepped out into the passenger compartment, all eyes immediately turned to her. The murmuring increased. Some guessed she was a technician. Some thought she was a secret agent. Some looked at her as if she were an unsolved mystery. And in the front row, Victoria stood up, her eyes meeting Naomi's. There was no more mockery, no more contempt, just shock mixed with a little fear, as if the world had turned against what she had always thought was her place. Naomi said nothing. She just walked straight, each step weighty, as if each one opened a whole new chapter for everyone on the plane, because that's exactly what's happening. As Naomi stepped out of the cockpit, the atmosphere in the cabin changed instantly. Gone was the usual hubbub of passengers preparing for takeoff. Instead, there was a tense silence, as if everyone was trying to figure out what was really going on. Eyes followed Naomi, curious, wary, worried, and a quiet respect that many didn't understand why they felt. She walked down the aisle slowly, but each step was sure. No rush, no hurry, no show of power. Just a woman burdened with too much responsibility to do otherwise. A little boy in the middle cabin asked his mother in a small but clear voice, "Mommy, what happened? Did the plane break down?" The mother placed her hand on her child's head and softly said, "I don't know either, but everything will be okay." Naomi heard, and the words made her chest tighten a little. She wanted to believe it was true, that everything would be okay. But the truth was, there were too many variables out there. Not far ahead, Victoria was still standing, her hands clasped together. As Naomi approached, Victoria swallowed, her voice trembling slightly, as if she could no longer believe her own emotions. "You really are?" The sentence was unfinished, choked. Naomi looked up, her gaze calm. "I was just doing my job." Daniel looked at Naomi with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture that Naomi understood to be a silent apology on behalf of his wife, who was drowning in her own shame. But Naomi didn't stay to see their reaction. She continued walking, heading towards the plane's door. Marlene, the chief flight attendant, was already standing there, looking serious but somewhat relieved that she understood the real reason behind it all. Marlene asked softly, "Are you sure you want to get off the plane now? We'll call a car to take you to the terminal. I need to leave as soon as possible. Downtown Chicago is waiting." Marlene nodded, then turned to the passengers, her voice loud but still maintaining a soft, professional tone. "Dear passengers, we will temporarily open the cabin door to assist a special personnel to leave the plane for security reasons. Please remain seated and do not stand up." Some passengers leaned forward, trying to get a better look at Naomi. Others covered their mouths in surprise. Others exchanged glances, as if watching a story they had never expected to be a part of. As Marlene opened the cabin door, a blast of cold air from the airport's air conditioning ducts blew in. Naomi stopped right at the boundary between the interior and exterior of the plane. She turned her head to look at the entire passenger cabin once more, and in that moment, something stirred deep inside her. She saw unfamiliar faces, but not meaningless ones. Each person here was part of the larger picture she was trying to protect. People who had no knowledge of the fight she, Elliot, and their team faced every day. People who just wanted to fly to safety. Naomi wondered if they knew what was really going on. Would fear prevail? Then she shook her head slightly. No, they don't need to know. Not now. She stepped out, and the compartment door slowly closed behind her. But before it closed completely, Naomi heard Victoria's voice, low, but clear enough. "She is. Strong." It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't an excuse. It was an acknowledgement, a costly acknowledgement, especially from someone like Victoria Hale. When Naomi stepped onto the ramp, she saw 2 ground staff waiting. A small electric car was parked nearby, its engine running as quietly as the wind. "Ms. Greene." "We were ordered to take you to the emergency dispatch room." Naomi nodded her thanks and got into the car. The car hummed softly as it moved along the wide corridors of the airport. In each area, Naomi saw people leisurely drinking coffee, families laughing and talking, and people getting off other flights dragging their luggage. A world so peaceful that no one could imagine that in just a few hours, if not handled promptly, the skies over the eastern United States could become chaotic. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath. The airport air, the smell of metal, the smell of carpet, the smell of responsibility was familiar, but still as heavy as the first day she started this job. She remembered Elliot's words this morning. "Naomi, if everything goes as predicted today, there will be no turning back." And she knew it was true. As the car entered the high security area, the staff opened the door for Naomi. She stepped out, her shoes clicking lightly on the polished floor. The control room door opened, and blue-white light streamed in, illuminating the large screens displaying dozens of flight routes. A small alarm bell rang out throughout the room. Elliot stood in the middle of the room, turning when he heard the door open. His eyes seemed to release some of the pressure when he saw Naomi. "You're here." Naomi let out a breath, put her bag down on the table, and loosened her collar. "Flight 623 has been grounded. The captain is cooperating well, but the signal is increasing rapidly. Right? Elliot nodded vigorously, increasing faster than expected. 2 southern routes are starting to be affected. And if we don't stop the root cause within the next hour and a half, there will be planes that will lose their guidance systems completely. The sentence fell into the air like a heavy stone. Naomi approached the control panel, her eyes sharp, her whole body entering a state of high concentration. Okay, Elliot, you update all the data. We'll start now. Elliot looked at Naomi, his voice soft but full of confidence. We will handle it, like always. Naomi shook her head very slightly. No, Elliot, this time is different. This time, we have to win. There is no other choice. And just then, a red warning flashed more strongly on the screen. No one said anything more, because everyone knows the real dangerous moment has just begun. The Chicago Center's emergency dispatch room is lit 24 hours a day. But today, the light is no longer the light of a normal workday. It is tense, cold, sharp, as if reminding us that every minute spent in this room could determine the lives of thousands of people in the sky. Naomi stood in the middle of the room, her eyes focused on the overhead screens. The flight paths on the map began to change color to yellow, then red. Green dots representing planes slowed, shuddered, then turned orange in unconfirmed problem. Elliot stood nearby, typing away at the data. The blue light from the screen illuminated his face, making him look even more tired than usual. He hadn't slept in 14 hours to keep up with the proceedings. Naomi glanced at him and asked softly, Have you had a drink? Elliot let out a small, nervous laugh. No, but I guess you haven't either. Naomi didn't answer. She stared at the central map. There was a red dot blinking in the northeast flight path, a wavering signal. Not strong, but enough to make her insides clench. Elliot, zoom in on that spot. Naomi's voice was low, slow, but the warning was clear. Elliot zoomed out the data layers, hovering near the red dot. The readings appeared Flight 781, altitude 31,000 feet, signal imbalance increasing, Elliot exclaimed. This is bad. Naomi stepped closer to the screen, her finger lightly touching the radar readings. We're losing control of the northeast line faster than I thought. Another employee ran over, a data file in hand. Ms. Greene, here's the updated data. There's another line that's jammed, and the jam frequency is spiraling around. Naomi took the papers and flipped through them. The numbers danced before her eyes, not like letters, but like screaming warnings. She whispered, It's not a coincidence. This is on purpose. Elliot turned to look at Naomi immediately. You think this isn't a natural accident? Naomi looked up, her eyes flashing with alarm. I think someone is interfering from the outside. And they know exactly how the guidance system works. Elliot clenched his fists. If that's true, then we're dealing with level 5. Naomi didn't deny it. We have to determine the source of the interference immediately. A technician at the next table called out, Ms. Greene, the original signal appears to originate in the ocean near Maine, but is spreading in a curve, as if a high-powered transmitter is scanning periodically. Naomi tilted her head, her eyes focused. That's not right. If it was just ocean interference, it wouldn't be spreading in a curved pattern like that. She paused. Elliot, remember? 2019. Elliot's eyes widened. The thing about the hacker group threatening to simulate satellite signals? Naomi nodded. I'm afraid it's not a simulation this time. The atmosphere in the room became heavy. Many employees looked at each other, but no one dared to say what they were thinking. Naomi took a deep breath, then spoke clearly. We must isolate the jamming area. Otherwise, within 2 hours, at least 3 planes will lose all ability to locate. Elliot immediately sat down, opening 3 more layers of simulation. Naomi, if I'm correct, the source of the interference is changing position, as if moving. Naomi stared at the large screen. It's a portable device. It can be placed on a train. Or, she swallowed, her heart stuttering, on a plane. The room was immediately in an uproar. A young employee asked immediately, his voice trembling, if it was a device placed on the plane, does that mean someone is deliberately causing chaos in the sky? Naomi didn't take her eyes off the map. I don't rule that out. Elliot looked at Naomi as if realizing the danger of what they were dealing with. So, what's next? Naomi closed her eyes for a few seconds to calm herself. She always did this before difficult decisions. A quiet moment to let her mind sort through the jumbled pieces. When she opened her eyes, her voice was completely calm. Find an aircraft whose flight path matches the direction of travel of the interference source, and check its route over the last 3 hours. Elliot got to work immediately. Naomi stared silently at the dots on the screen. Hundreds of planes were moving through the air like fireflies in the black sky. Each dot was a person, a hope, a family waiting at home. She suddenly heard her mother, Linda Greene, echoing from her memory. Naomi, you don't have to do it alone, but sometimes God chooses the strongest person to do the hardest thing. That sentence had made Naomi cry as a child, but now it was the only support in a moment of overwhelming pressure. Elliot called out, "Found it?" Naomi ran back. What plane? Elliot rotated the screen. Flight 981, international route from Quebec to Atlanta. Its flight path matches the path of the jam, and the rate of change in the signal matches its climb. Naomi kept her breath. Maybe the jamming device was on Flight 981 itself. Elliot gasped, "My God, if we get it right, that plane could be being used without anyone knowing." Naomi corrected herself immediately. "We can't let anyone on the plane panic. Let's verify first." Elliot nodded vigorously and began accessing the data stream. "I'm opening the black box temporarily. If there's a strange signal on it, it'll show up." Naomi stood right behind him, her hands gripping the edge of the table lightly. A few seconds later, the screen flashed a signal code that was not part of the airline's main system. Elliot was stunned. "Naomi, this is the disassembly code." Naomi felt her heart drop a notch. "We're sure. There's a jammer on Flight 981. The room fell silent. No one dared speak, but everyone knew they were facing a real conspiracy. Naomi spoke slowly, each word as hard as steel. "Lock Flight 981 in the system, and prepare to send a special alert. If the device activates at high level, the entire Northeast will be paralyzed." Elliot turned to look at Naomi. "Are you ready?" Naomi took a deep breath, her eyes sharp, calm but firm, like a metal pillar in a storm. "I was born for times like this." And at that very second, a new, stronger red warning flashed across the screen. No one needs to ask more. The real storm has arrived. The Chicago Center dispatch room held its breath as the red alert flashed a second time on the screen. All the sounds slowed down, as if waiting for Naomi to make her next decision. The technicians stood in small groups, all trying to stay calm, but their eyes reflected undisguised fear. Naomi stepped closer to the central screen, her hands resting on the cold metal keyboard. She took a deep breath, as if to pull all the pressure into her lungs and turn it into fuel to continue fighting. Elliot stood beside her, his voice hoarse with tension. "Naomi, there's a spike in interference at 57.2. That's a level that only occurs when there's a secondary source." Naomi frowned. "So besides Flight 981, there was another device?" Elliot nodded. "Exactly. The noise pattern now looks like two intersecting vortices. If they combine—" He paused, not wanting to continue, but Naomi understood. If combined, the entire Northeast guidance grid would be short-circuited, and the 12 planes at intersecting altitudes could lose synchronization. A young employee standing nearby stammered, "So, there will be a collision in the air." Naomi turned, her voice soft but firm, like a teacher's, both reassuring and reminding of responsibility. "We're here to make sure that doesn't happen." The room nodded slightly. They needed to hear it. They needed a point of reference. And Naomi was standing in that spot. Elliot continued to input commands into the simulation system. "Naomi, look. The signal curves are narrowing. That means the two noise sources are getting closer." Naomi looked at the screen, her eyes deepening. "It's not a coincidence. They're converging." Elliot gasped. "It's like someone knew exactly how to coordinate the frequencies to disrupt us." There was a moment of silence that seemed like a minute. Naomi stood still, but her mind worked like a tactical machine. "Locate the second source," she said. A technician answered immediately. "Tracking. But it's not on an international route. It's moving slowly, like it's underground." Naomi was startled. Underground. Maybe a special vehicle. Or— She paused, then continued in a lower voice. A temporary transmitter. Elliot understood immediately. You mean someone planted a cell tower on the mainland? Naomi nodded. If that's true, then this isn't a technical problem. This is intentional. The sound of keyboards being tapped echoed from all directions. The air in the room became so thick and heavy that anyone who breathed felt pressured. Another technician shouted, Found it! Ms. Greene. The second source of interference is a truck traveling on Route 7 about 90 miles from Brunswick Airport. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Truck? What kind? No license plate. The traffic camera picked up the signal before the car entered the dark area. But the signal coincided with a type of super-frequency aviation jamming device that only the military can use. The room was silent. Naomi put a hand on Elliot's shoulder. We don't have much time. The two sources of interference are closing in. If they reach the point of convergence, Elliot continued, his voice low, the navigation system would be thrown into disarray. Not just 3, but possibly at least 8 aircraft would lose their ability to locate within minutes. Naomi turned around to face the entire engineering team. Listen to me. We need to split into 2 groups. One to track Flight 981. One to track the jamming truck. I will be coordinating both. All nodded in unison. Elliot continued working, his hands shaking slightly from the pressure. Naomi placed her hand on his arm, squeezing gently. Calm down. You are the person I trust the most. Elliot looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. Naomi, you don't have to take it all on. Naomi smiled slightly, but it was a sad smile. Elliot, when I stepped into this position, I knew what I had to bear, but I was never alone. With that, she turned back to the Flight 981 screen. 2 red signal lines intersected like 2 streams of blood stretching across the black sky. She spoke softly, but there was steely determination in her voice. Start blocking each signal layer by layer. Separate the satellite signal from the simulated signal. Elliot nodded vigorously. Understood. The screen started to fade from red to orange, but still flickered slightly. The signal is stabilizing, but not enough. Elliot said. Naomi looked at her watch. Each second ticked by like the last grain of sand in the mortal clock. An employee ran over, his face pale. Ms. Green Flight 981 just sent a distress call. The pilot says the plane is starting to deviate 12 miles from its course. The room exploded with sound. Naomi gritted her teeth. No, it can't go on. She rushed to the large console, typing in high-speed commands. Elliot, help me switch all channels to 77.9. Begin generating a fake signal to mask the interference. Elliot shouted. Level 4. Phantom signal may cause interference with international lines. Naomi gasped. This is the only option to save Flight 981. We must place a replacement net immediately. Elliot looked at Naomi for a few seconds. Then he nodded. Okay, I believe you. The 2 of them typed in commands together. The screen flashed continuously. Signal circles swept across the map like a tsunami. Then, the Flight 981 icon slowed down. No more deviation. Naomi let out a long sigh. So tired she had to hold on to the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. A technician whispered, She did it. But before Naomi could take a second breath, the red alert popped up again. This time the sound was louder, faster, more intense. Elliot looked at the screen and whispered, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Naomi, the second jamming source truck is heading straight for Brunswick Military Base. Naomi stood up straight, her spine frozen. If the truck enters that area, she understood what that meant. And that would be the biggest storm of her life. The air in the control room seemed to freeze as Elliot spoke the last sentence. The silence was so heavy that everyone could hear the electricity running through the computer system. Naomi stood in front of the large screen, her eyes fixed on the moving dot on the map, as if she stared long enough, she could stop it from approaching Brunswick Military Base. A technician tapped his headphones, then turned back to report Ms. Greene. Signal confirmed. The truck is traveling at a steady speed of about 45 miles per hour. No signs of stopping. Naomi tilted her head, her voice low. 45 miles an hour is enough to avoid the attention of the traffic police, but still within the travel cycle of the jamming signal. She pursed her lips. There must be someone controlling it, Elliot interjected, his voice low but trembling with seriousness. If they approached Brunswick Military Base, they could activate a strong phase signal. The defense system there will respond with an extremely high frequency. Naomi finished his unfinished sentence. And when the two frequencies intersect, the northeastern sky will be completely dark. The room fell silent. Only the heavy breathing of a few young employees remained. Another person ran over and placed the data pad in front of Naomi, his hands shaking slightly. This is a simulation prediction. If the truck enters the interference zone, the signal will reach a breaking point. That could cause 5 to 8 planes to lose guidance within 3 to 5 minutes. And we don't have enough crews in that area to support all of them. Naomi read quickly, her heart aching with each line. She felt a chill down her spine, as if an electric current ran up her neck. Elliot looked at Naomi. We have to intervene before the truck reaches the military gate. Naomi raised her head, her posture as straight as a spear. We will start trying to identify the driver. An officer turned on the traffic camera and rewound the last bit of footage. The image was blurry, but one could still make out the figure of a man in his 50s, wearing a baseball cap, strangely calm as he got into the car. His face was expressionless. He didn't look around. He didn't look scared. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Not the type to use a car to rob the road. This is someone who is prepared. Another officer turned on the image analysis screen. The fingerprint does not match the wanted criminal, does not match the population data, possibly a false identity. Elliot smacked his lips. We are dealing with someone who knows how to hide. Naomi was silent for a few seconds. Then she asked, her voice even, but tinged with extreme caution, is there any way to stop the truck before it enters the military zone? We could alert traffic or call the Maine State Police. But if we're talking about jamming devices, they'd need to verify. Too long, a technician quickly replied. Naomi nodded slightly. I don't want to wait for the procedure, the young technician hesitantly asked. So, what do you want to do? Naomi looked at the map. The red lines began to spiral, like two storms trying to squeeze the sky. She spoke slowly, word by word. We have to use our own system to intercept the signals before they combine. Elliot understood immediately. Create a noise cancellation net. Naomi nodded. Yes. Use a secondary frequency. Create a temporary barrier between the two sources. One employee immediately objected. But if the secondary frequency is off by just 1%, it will reverse and cause a domino effect. It could cause the satellite signal to be off in the entire area. Naomi looked at him, her voice soft, but her meaning clear. I know, but we have no other choice. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Naomi. Elliot swallowed. If you fail, Naomi, you know what the consequences are. I know, Naomi replied without a moment's hesitation. But if we don't do something, those 8 planes will lose their bearings, and we'll all live with the memory for the rest of our lives. Elliot looked at Naomi for a long time. There was absolute respect in his eyes. Then I will go with you. Naomi nodded slightly, as if thanking him wordlessly. Instantly, the entire control room went into high gear. Keyboards started tapping. Radios started chirping. Data analyzers were running nonstop. Naomi stood in front of the central console, her fingers flying over the keyboard at such a speed that the keys were barely discernible. She entered the sub-frequency code, each step precise. Elliot assisted by handling the simulation loops, his hands shaking slightly as he watched the graph lines jump wildly. The truck is 2 miles from Brunswick Military Base, an employee exclaimed. Naomi gritted her teeth. Pull the simulator up to the 3rd floor. Check that the WaveNet is stable enough. A beep sounded. 82% stable. Not enough, Naomi replied coldly. It has to be at least 94% before it goes off. Elliot quickly entered the signal amplitude increase code, going up 87, 91. The screen shook violently, as if the system was also feeling the stress. A technician shouted, Naomi Flight 623 is asking why the signal just went out. Naomi kept her cool. Tell them to maintain course, not change altitude. And tell Captain Harris that I'm deploying the final phase of the WaveNet. Elliot continued counting 92, 93, 93.7. Naomi placed her hands on the control panel like a commander preparing to give the order to fire. Elliot, how much time until the truck enters the military zone? About 40 seconds. Naomi exhaled deeply. Her lungs tightened with pressure. but her hands didn't shake. "We do it as soon as we reach 94%. Elliot squinted at the screen. 93.8, 93.9. Everyone in the room stopped breathing. Then the screen pops up the expected number, 94.0%. Naomi spoke softly but firmly, like the sound of a hammer hitting metal. "Activate the grid." She pressed enter. For a second, the entire signal map turned white. The swirls of noise disappeared, replaced by a smooth yet powerful wall of subfrequency lines. Elliot shouted, "The two signals have separated." Another technician shouted in disbelief, "We blocked it. The truck can no longer penetrate the net." Naomi gasped for breath and had to put her hands on the table to keep from collapsing, but her eyes lit up, like a ray of hope in the darkness. Elliot lightly touched Naomi's shoulder, his voice low but filled with emotion. "You just saved the entire northeast sky." But before Naomi could reply, another sound came from the warning system. One long beep, low, deep, not noise. Elliot turned back to the screen, his face paled. "Naomi, the truck driver just activated the frequency conversion to level 5. Naomi stood up straight, her heart sinking as if someone was squeezing it. "Level 5. Danger level used only in electronic warfare." She whispered, "The war isn't over yet." The level 5 warning sounded like a funeral bell, long and cold, making the entire dispatch room freeze, as if someone had pulled the emergency brake in the middle of the freeway. No one spoke, no one breathed heavily, only the red rotating lights reflected on the technicians' pale faces. Elliot was the first to break the silence, but his voice was trembling slightly. "Naomi, level 5 is only used in electronic warfare situations. No one has access to that kind of equipment outside of the military." Naomi stepped closer to the screen. The image of the waveforms jumped, twisting into sharp, heartbreaking zigzags. She felt a chill run down her spine, but her eyes remained coldly focused. "Give me a detailed analysis of the level 5 signal." Naomi's voice was low, even, and unwavering, even though she knew in her heart this was beyond any situation she had faced since taking command. An agent adjusted his glasses, his hand sliding across the keyboard. "The signal has changed to a 3-layer helix phase structure. The oscillation frequency is 4 times the safe level." Elliot continued, "It can get past our shield, not by directly disrupting it, but by overloading it." Naomi understood immediately. "It's like constantly pumping water into a dam. The dam won't break right away, but it will eventually crack." A young employee shouted, "The second floor of the breakwater is losing stability, from 94% to 88%. Elliot frowned at the datapad. "Naomi, if you drop it below 82%, the shield will start vibrating. Signals can leak through small gaps." Naomi stood still for a few seconds. The sounds in the room seemed muffled behind her ears. She remembered her mother's voice in the small kitchen. Linda had said, "You must never be afraid of chaos. You must be the one to help people see the way out when all they see is darkness." She whispered, "Mom, I'm doing exactly what you said." Then Naomi raised her head, her eyes deep and bright like freshly sharpened steel. "I want to check if level 5 is activated by programming or manually." Elliot turned his chair, looking at Naomi in disbelief. "You think someone is directly controlling it?" Naomi replied immediately. "I am sure." No one objected. Everyone felt the same way. "We have a secondary source of vibration," a technician shouted. "The signal variations resemble the movements of a human hand. It is irregular, like a machine," Elliot muttered. "Oh my God, that means someone is controlling it, like turning a knob," Naomi said firmly. "Give me the conversion sound." The technician played a sound wave. It wasn't like a static electronic sound. It had a beat, a hesitation, a pause, like someone testing a complex device but not quite perfecting its operation. And Naomi closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. Not an expert, but a mentor. Elliot turned to look at her. "What makes you so sure? Because if it was an expert, the signal would be smoother." This person was nervous. A tension spread throughout the air. People began to feel a strange fear. The fear did not come from the technology, but from the person holding the technological device. Naomi put her hands on the console. "We need to know what they want to do. Are they trying to destroy Brunswick military base, or are they trying to cause military signals to fail an employee said in panic. Naomi shook her head. No. If that was the purpose, they would have used a more powerful device. They were trying to cause chaos in the skies. Elliot's eyes widened. What for? It would affect both civilians and the military, Naomi replied. Yes, because the target is not Brunswick. The target is us. The coordination system, a female employee whispered. As a warning, Elliot turned to Naomi. Do you think they wanted to send a message? Naomi looked at the truck's signal dot, slowly creeping toward Brunswick like a predator, taking its last strides before charging into the convergence point. Not to send a message, she said. It's to prove they can keep us helpless. While the entire control room was immersed in that heavy thought, the signal on the map suddenly jumped. A series of red lights flashed, then turned orange. One employee shouted, "The WaveNet is down to 85%, Elliot exclaimed. Don't let it go down to 82. Naomi rushed to the control panel, her voice loud and clear. Switch to satellite signal priority protection mode. Reduce the first floor signal load. Keep the second floor stable. The staff followed suit. The sound of keyboards resounded in the room, but the screen kept going down. 84.6, 84.2, 83.3. Naomi bit her lip, only for a second, but everyone saw it. The breakwaters were down to 83%, which meant one more push would put them at 82. Elliot quickly reported, time to the intersection is 30 seconds. Naomi tried to keep her breathing calm, but inside, everything was swirling like a storm. She looked at Elliot. He looked back at her. Wordlessly. They knew they were thinking the same thing. Naomi said loudly, I will work directly on the signal floor. Everyone assist Elliot in stabilizing the simulation. Elliot turned around Naomi. You can't interfere with the signal layer directly. It's dangerous, Naomi replied immediately. We have no choice. If I fine-tune it correctly, we can hold out for a few more minutes. Elliot squeezed her shoulders, his voice falling into despair. If there is a 1% error, the system will backfire and the satellites will lock this area. Naomi looked at Elliot, her eyes filled with the calmness that only someone who had weathered hundreds of storms in their life could have. Elliot, do you trust me? Elliot pressed his lips together, his hands shaking. Then he nodded, slowly but surely. I believe. Naomi sat down at the subconsole. She tapped into the top-level security interface. The system verified the fingerprint. The screen lit up. No one spoke. No one dared to disturb her. Everything in the room revolved around the movements of Naomi's 10 fingers. She adjusted 3 parameters, increased the substabilizer level, reduced the processor temperature, opened the second nanofilter. Elliot followed each change. The text jumped up. Stability 83.1, 83.4, 83.8, 84.0. Elliot almost burst into tears. Naomi, it's coming back, the staff shouted. The WaveNet is safe. But at that moment, the truck signal suddenly jumped a long way on the map. Not as if it was accelerating. It was as if someone had activated a different mode. A new sound rang out. Not a warning, not static, but it was a short ping, clear, cold, like a timer going off. Elliot looked at Naomi, his face pale as a sheet. Naomi, the operator just switched to the targeting frequency. They're locking onto Brunswick. Naomi stood up. Her eyes held a mixture of fear, determination, and the intuition of someone who knew things were about to get out of hand. No, she whispered. They're not after Brunswick. Elliot was stunned. If not Brunswick, then what are they? After Naomi looked at the map, at the intersection that was swirling like a tornado about to hit the ground. Aim at us. The room fell into a horrified silence, and that was just the beginning of the darkness that was about to fall. No one in the control room breathed after Naomi's words. The air was as thick as a thick fog that could not be cleared. The flickering lights on the control panels reflected on everyone's tense faces. In that moment, all the noise faded away. Only Naomi stood in the center of the technological storm, her deep eyes staring at the point of light that was shooting toward Chicago Center like a red spear. Elliot swallowed, his voice hoarse. Naomi, why target the coordination center? It won't benefit them. They don't need benefits, Naomi replied without taking her eyes off the map. They need to prove that we can't protect ourselves. If the command center is paralyzed, The entire sky will be stripped of its reins. A young technician, his face pale. They want to create a chain reaction. Naomi nodded slightly. And do it while we're busy keeping 8 planes from losing their bearings. A data inspector, his hand shaking so much he mistyped, said, "I'm seeing. The truck just increased its power by another 10%. The interference is getting stronger, heading straight for our control area." Elliot swore under his breath, then looked at Naomi. "We have to call the Federal Security Agency. This is no longer a civil incident." Naomi shook her head slightly. "If we report it, it will take time for them to verify, and we don't have time." A female employee worriedly said, "But Naomi, this is an act of national aggression. If we handle it on our own—" Naomi turned to look at her, her voice calm but powerful. "And if we stand still, 8 planes will fall into the blind spot, and hundreds of people could die. Any decision we make, right or wrong, is not as important as saving them first." No one dared to object. Suddenly, the signal on the screen jumped. A red line separated from the vortex, rushing towards the center like a snake squeezing its prey. A technician shouted, "The 3rd floor of the wave shield is penetrated." Elliot slammed his hand on the table. "Damn, they're locking onto the core frequency," Naomi whispered. "No, they're targeting me." Elliot turned around, not believing his ears. "Naomi." Naomi was silent. Her face did not change, but her eyes grew deeper, as if touching an unshared memory. A vague silence passed. Then she said, "Because I was the only one who had successfully intercepted the same signal 8 years ago, and also the only one who had caused an organization to disband because of a failed jamming experiment." The whole room turned to look at Naomi. Elliot froze. "You mean it's not over yet?" Naomi nodded slightly. "I thought they were gone, but it seems someone still remembers me." A young employee trembled, his voice as small as the wind. You mean, this is revenge." Naomi did not answer directly. She turned back to the screen. The truck continued to aim straight for the center. The level 5 signal was controlled like the hands of a predator playing cat and mouse. Naomi took a slow and deep breath. "I need the analysis team to open the signal history from 8 years ago. Compare it to the current phase structure." Elliot immediately followed suit, opening 2 signal windows side by side. And then he froze. "Naomi, the 2 signals are almost exactly the same. Only, the current operator is clumsier," Naomi whispered, "because the old man is no longer there." Elliot started, his eyes widening. "You mean Mason Clive?" The one who controlled the level 5 signal. Naomi stood still for a few seconds before saying, "Mason died right after that failure. But he had an apprentice. I met him exactly once." A technician immediately asked, "Name? Do you have a record?" Naomi shook her head. "No records, no identity. Just the name I heard Mason call me Carter." Elliot nodded. "Connecting the data, which means the current controller could be Carter, and he's trying to continue Mason's work." Naomi said nothing. Her eyes followed the truck signal, as if trying to penetrate the driver's intentions. Elliot's voice became urgent. "The truck is 14 miles from the dispatch center." "If he activates the 2nd phase," Naomi interrupted, "we'll lose all core frequency in 4 minutes. An employee burst into tears. "How can we stop it? He is using level 5. We cannot continue to increase the wave shield. The system will be overloaded." Naomi took a deep breath. A very deep breath. Then she said, "I will have to control the core layer myself." Elliot turned around. Panicked Naomi. "No one can do it alone. The core level is the most dangerous. If you make one wrong move, you will destroy the entire central frequency," Naomi replied in a soft but rock-solid voice. "If I don't do it, Carter will do it for me." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Everyone understood what Naomi meant. She wasn't just manipulating frequencies. She was directly confronting Carter on the invisible battlefield of electronic waves. This is no longer a job. This is a duel. Naomi took her seat on the core floor. The screen lit up a deep blue, what the industry calls the color of the abyss. Elliot stood close behind her, eyes fixed on her. "Naomi, are you sure?" Naomi didn't look at him, but her voice warmed a little. "Elliot, I've been preparing for this moment for 8 years. Elliot placed his hands on the back of the chair. "Then let me be the one to keep things steady around you." Naomi smiled slightly. It was a very small smile. but enough to reassure everyone. She placed her 10 fingers on the core keyboard, not quickly, but slowly, evenly, like a pianist preparing to play the last piece of a performance. A technician called out, "Carter's signal is increasing its twist frequency. He's pushing level 5 higher than standard." Elliot looked at Naomi. "He is challenging you." Naomi didn't stop. She just replied in a low voice, "Almost a breath, I know, and I will answer." Carter's signal rotated, hitting the core layer straight. Naomi adjusted the frequency left, shifted the phase right, created a protective warp, and inserted it into the gap Carter tried to push. The two streams of signals collided on the screen like two red and white lightning bolts entwining. The whole room stood still, watching the invisible battle between the two brains. An employee whispered, "She's reading his hand rhythm." "She's not just reading," Elliot whispered. "She's leading." Carter's signal vibrated once. Then Naomi pushed the core to the left. Carter reacted half a second late. Naomi raised the beam again. Carter was pushed back. Elliot almost shouted, "Naomi, you're winning." But suddenly, Carter's signal changed, no longer clumsy, no longer slow. He changed frequencies as quickly as if someone had flipped a new switch. Elliot gasped. He is increasing his reaction speed." Naomi paused for a second. Her voice became sharp as a knife. "No, this is not Carter anymore." She looked straight at the screen. "Someone else just joined." The control room almost stopped breathing. The air became thick like a thick fog, enveloping everyone's every breath. Naomi was still sitting there, her hands on the core keyboard, but her eyes were glued to the screen with such sharp concentration that those nearby did not dare to move. Elliot was the first to break the silence, his voice hoarse with tension. "Naomi, are you sure there are others involved in the signal?" Naomi kept her eyes on the oscilloscope. The red lines on the screen changed so quickly that they seemed to glow on their own. "That's right. Carter couldn't have reacted that quickly." "This is the technique of someone with real experience," she said, her voice even but cold. "This is Mason's style." Elliot was startled. "But Mason Clive is dead. He couldn't have." Naomi shook her head slightly. "I know, but this style is Mason's. If someone had been trained well by Mason, they might not be as clumsy as Carter." A technician spoke up, his voice shaking more than usual. "So we are facing someone many times better than Carter." Naomi nodded slightly. And of all the things that were happening, this was what she feared the most. On the screen, the level 5 signal spun like a giant tornado, so strong that her defense lines shook continuously. It was as if someone was grabbing the entire system and shaking it. Naomi adjusted the core, her hands moving quickly but precisely, each beat as if playing the piano in a concert hall. Every command she input directly countered the attack from the other side. An employee shouted, "Their frequency just jumped 3 levels in 2 seconds." Elliot frowned. "Impossible. Humans don't react that fast." "Unless they have a support system?" Naomi whispered. Elliot looked at her worriedly. "You mean they use machines to speed up the operation?" Naomi nodded. "Not a machine. It's an AI simulating Mason's actions." Elliot froze. "Naomi, how did you know?" She took a deep breath. 8 years ago, Mason bragged to me that he was building an automated control system that could learn from his own actions. I reported it, and his organization was disbanded." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "You think Carter can keep that system?" "Not just keep it," Naomi said, her eyes still on the signal. "He upgraded it." A red flash suddenly appeared on the screen. The whole room was startled. A technician cried out in panic. "The second floor of the wave-breaking net is broken. We lost 15% immediately." Elliot rushed to the console, his hand scanning the analysis tools. "Naomi, they're using multi-layer phase separation algorithms." "We can't patch everything," Naomi remained calm. "Focus on the center button. If you hold it, everything will be fine." But she knew very well that fine was just a way of saying it to reassure everyone. If the central node was penetrated, the entire core layer would collapse like dominoes. A young employee, her face paler than a sheet of paper, asked quietly, "Are they trying to force you to break their own system?" Naomi turned back and looked at the person. Not an angry look, not a reproachful one, just the sad calm of someone who had seen through the situation. "Yes, they wanted me to react too quickly, too strongly. They wanted to force me to make a wrong move." Elliot squeezed her shoulder. Naomi, you're not alone. We're here. Naomi looked at Elliot for a second, enough to see the trust and fear in his eyes. Then she turned back to the screen and said, Thank you, but the person they're after is me. A beep sounded, sharp, loud, like metal hitting the floor. A technician shouted, almost choking Naomi. They just locked the subcore. If they twist it one more time, the signal will backfire, Elliot whispered. It's a trap. They're setting a trap for you. Naomi nodded slightly. And I won't go in. She changed her direction of operation, not following the normal logic that the core layer was designed for. She slipped through the 2 layers of protection, circled down to the lower layer, and pulled the frequency into a soft curve, like a skilled craftsman dodging a knife. Elliot almost shouted, You dodged it, Naomi. You did it. But Naomi did not laugh, because at that moment, something appeared that sent a chill down her spine. On the screen, the opponent's red spiral changed suddenly, changing in exactly what she just did. Naomi froze for half a second. Elliot whispered, They are learning from you. Naomi felt her breath catch. No, not studying. She stood up and took a step toward the screen, as if wanting to look more closely. They understand me. Everyone looked at each other confused. One technician asked, Understand you? What do you mean? Naomi narrowed her eyes, her voice lowered to a chilling low. There was only one person who understood how I controlled the core layer, one person who studied my techniques, who predicted every adjustment. Elliot stammered, Naomi, who are you talking about? Naomi swallowed. Her voice was low, heavy as if carrying the shadows of the past. It's not Carter. It's not AI. It's not an algorithm. She took a deep breath. That's the person who leaked all my test data to Mason 8 years ago. The room was dead silent, as if everyone had forgotten how to blink. Elliot whispered, Naomi, you said that person disappeared. Naomi replied in a voice so cold that it made the whole room shiver. I thought so too. She stared at the screen. If I'm right, the one controlling the signal right now is Ava. Elliot gasped. Ava Carter. The one who used to be Mason's assistant. Naomi nodded slightly. No, Ava Collins, my assistant. The room fell into horror, because Ava Collins was the only person who had ever come close to matching Naomi's skill at signal control, and the one who had disappeared without a trace. Right after the incident 8 years ago, a technician whispered, Naomi, if Ava is controlling the signal, then we are dealing with the person who knows us best, Naomi replied, her voice low but sharp. No, we are facing the person who knows me best. Out there. The red signal point continued to rush towards the coordination center. Faster, stronger, more precise. Naomi gripped the console tightly. A big decision was forming in her eyes. She spoke softly, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. If Ava wants to fight, I will fight. The air in the control room became so cold that some people unconsciously hugged their arms. The light from the control panel reflected on Naomi's face, but it could not hide the profound change in her eyes. It was no longer the eyes of a signal operator. It was the eyes of someone about to face the ghost of her own past. Elliot stood beside her, his face almost pale. Naomi? Ava Collins. Why did she do this? Naomi didn't answer right away. She took a deep, slow breath. Then she spoke, her voice as low as the night wind blowing across a lake. Ava wanted to be the best, but Mason used her as a tool. I tried to pull Ava out of that, but she chose her own path. Ava used to work right next to you, the technician asked, his voice trembling. Naomi, she knows our entire system. Naomi nodded, her gaze sharpening. Yes, she knows how I will react in every situation, and she is using that to attack. A loud alarm sounded from the screen. A red wave swirled violently, rushing towards the core at double speed. Elliot cried out. Naomi Ava is trying to lock down the entire core. If she succeeds, we will lose control of the signal. Naomi immediately sat in the control chair, her hands on the keyboard with a terrifying calm. No, she won't succeed. Not with me. She began to type. Not fast, not jerkily. Naomi's movements were like piano strokes, precise, steady, confident enough to silence the control room. The screen responded to her every command with blue lines of light. The defense frequencies were rebuilt layer by layer. But Ava didn't slow down. The red signal twisted violently. The two signal vortexes intertwined, forming an attack pattern that no one in the room had ever seen before. She's using a frequency decay algorithm. The whole system will crash if Naomi doesn't react in time. A staff member shouted. Elliot stood close to Naomi, his hands on the armrests of the chair, his voice low but urgent. Naomi, don't let her dictate the pace of this match. Ava wants to pull you into her pace. Naomi didn't look up. That's why, she said slowly. I'm going to force Ava to go at my pace. She pulled the frequency down, slowed down the rotation, slowed the fight. The technician couldn't believe his eyes. Naomi, you're slowing down the signal. But that's, Elliot answered for her. That way Ava will be exposed. In the world of signals, slowing down is something few dare to do. It's like slowing down in the middle of a chase. If one doesn't have the confidence, it's suicide. But Naomi does, and she does it with the air of someone who knows she's calling the shots. Ava's Rita signal slowed down a beat, then another. Naomi sighed softly. That's right. Ava couldn't hide anymore. Elliot looked at Naomi, eyes wide. You're pulling Ava right into your control. Naomi moved her fingers a little. The signal winch swung slightly to the left, then to the right. And just as Naomi predicted, Ava reacted immediately. An employee whispered, She mimics Naomi's every move. Elliot clenched his fists on the chair. It's not imitation. Ava understands Naomi. This is a personal confrontation. Just then, Ava's signal suddenly lit up. A new red spiral appears. It doesn't attack straight. It loops back, Elliot shouted. Naomi Ava is hitting a blind spot. Naomi typed 3 commands in a row, switching the defense frequency to the lowest level, then rebuilding it from the bottom to the top. It was such a beautiful move that the entire control room held its breath to watch. Ava's spiral hit the newly erected shield and bounced back. Several employees let out gasps of disbelief. Elliot exhaled as if pulled out of water. Naomi, you just pushed the Ava signal. You're ahead. Naomi still didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't get complacent. Her voice was just a cold, sharp stream. No, Ava isn't the type to lose that easily. And just as she predicted, a long beep sounded, not red, not yellow, but it is black. The color does not belong to any warning code. A staff member trembled. Black signal. What mode is this? Naomi stood up abruptly, her chair moving back a little. She almost whispered dark phase. The entire dispatch room fell into panic. Dark phase was a signal mode not available in civilian systems. Only Mason and Ava had ever spoken of it. Elliot looked at Naomi as if he had just heard the impossible. Naomi, is the dark phase real? Naomi nodded slightly. Mason tested it. But I thought Ava didn't know how to activate it. A black spiral rushed towards the core. No light, no ripples, just an expanding void, swallowing all. A technician shouted, It's erasing the protection data. Naomi regained her composure quickly. She sat down, her hands on the keyboard, typing more continuously than ever before. Core level locked. Switch to pulse protection. Her voice was firm. Elliot was stunned. Handshake. You mean, right, Naomi interrupted. No algorithms. Just human speed and experience. No one in the room dared to speak. No one had ever seen anyone control the core level with their bare hands. Naomi began. Her 10 fingers moved like lightning, but each stroke carried absolute precision. Black signal rushes. Naomi blocks. Ava turns left. Naomi turns right. Ava changes speed. Naomi changes direction. This was no longer a battle of technology. This was a direct fight between 2 men who knew each other better than anyone. Elliot gasped. You two are like looking into each other's thoughts. Naomi didn't answer. She couldn't. The game was too intense, too heavy to be distracted. An employee shouted, Ava's signal penetrated the level 4 core. Naomi flipped her hand, rotating the keyboard, creating a double barrier. 2 black spirals were pushed out, but Naomi pursed her lips, breathing heavily. Elliot could see she was starting to tire. Naomi, you, she spoke quickly. Not letting him worry for long? I'm fine. Ava is strong. But I have something she doesn't have. Elliot leaned over. What Naomi looked straight at the screen. I have faith in the people behind me. She pressed the last two commands, pushed dark phase back up a notch, created a lock. Perfect block. The whole room burst into cheers. Ava's signal was pushed back, then disappeared from the screen. A moment of silence. Elliot looked at Naomi, eyes wide. Naomi, you won. Naomi leaned back wearily in her chair, her breath shaking slightly. Not yet. Ava didn't disappear. She just retreated. A technician asked, "What is the point of withdrawing?" Naomi stared at the truck stop sign on the map, stopped right at the edge of the residential area. She spoke softly, but the whole room was cold. Ava retreated, only to prepare for the next blow, and that attack won't target the signal anymore. The signal map on the home screen no longer moved as vigorously as before. No more red swirls, no more dense black rings of dark phase. Carter's truck stopped at the edge of the residential area, between two small T-shaped streets. The dim streetlights reflected off the roof, creating a long streak of light, like a thin blade against the neck of the city. No one in the control room spoke. They knew this silence was not a sign of safety. It was a sign of another kind of danger, deeper, more unpredictable. Elliot approached Naomi. Are you sure Ava didn't withdraw because she lost Naomi kept her eyes on the screen? Her gaze never left the truck. No, Ava isn't the type to give up. She changes her focus. Elliot swallowed. You mean the target is no longer the core? Naomi whispered. Yes. Ava knew I would hold the core. She decided to attack where it was weakest. A young employee asked, his voice trembling slightly. Where is your weakest point? Naomi turned her head and looked at everyone. Her voice was very slow, but so clear that everyone felt a chill run down their spine. Human. The room was silent. Naomi continued. Ava knows me well. She knows that attacking the system with technology has a chance of failure, but attacking it psychologically, with people, is much more dangerous. Just then, the side monitor flashed. A local patrol camera feed came on, the image of a man with a heavy gait, Carter-like, carrying a large metal box, stepping out of the truck, not in a hurry, not in secret, as if on a mission. Elliot looked at Naomi. What did Carter bring? Naomi stared at the object. She spoke with a heavy breath. A secondary signal box. Mason used this to activate dark phase when his main attack path was blocked. Another employee let out a loud sigh. But Naomi, if it's a sub-signal box, it can generate low-level dark phase without the core layer. Naomi nodded slowly. Yes. Ava is trying to create a dark phase on the ground. Elliot frowned. That means, instead of core infrastructure, what are they trying to do? Naomi clenched her fingers. Jamming other signals, including drone control signals, traffic drones, rescue signals, everything. The room erupted in panicked murmurs. If the rescue drone loses signal, the city's automated system will stop working, and a whole area will fall into chaos. A female technician said in fear. Elliot turned back to Naomi, his eyes filled with tension. Naomi, Ava is no longer attacking you. She is attacking the city. Naomi closed her eyes for 3 seconds. 3 very short seconds, but long enough for her to take in what had just happened. An old rival, a system being manipulated in a way it was never designed to be. A city of millions on the brink of chaos because of a single decision by Ava. She opened her eyes. They were no longer tired. Instead, they were calm and strong, causing Elliot to clench his sleeves. I have to stop her, Naomi said firmly. Elliot immediately interrupted. Naomi, you can't go out. You're the only one who can protect the system in this room. Naomi stood up from her chair. I'm the only one Ava wants. If I don't come out, she'll do anything to make me come out. Elliot suddenly understood. She's luring you into a trap. Naomi nodded slightly. Yes, but if I don't go, the city will lose too much. Another employee spoke up, his voice filled with fear. Naomi, if Ava wanted to attack with dark phase in real life, the risk is incalculable. Naomi calmly replied. I know. Elliot looked deep into Naomi's eyes. You're not doing this for the city, are you? Naomi didn't beat around the bush. She told the truth. Straight. Without hiding, I did it because I needed closure. Closure with Ava, closure with the past. The room fell silent. Then Naomi pulled out the Supreme Access card from her badge. The system immediately recognized it and opened control to Elliot. I hand over control to you temporarily. Elliot was startled. Naomi, you'll be fine. She smiled, soft and sad. You learned quickly, and you have the right heart. The Corps will be fine in the hands of someone like you. Elliot didn't know what to say. He just looked at her, his eyes red with worry. Naomi stood up and walked to the door. Before opening it, she turned back to look at everyone. If Ava wants me, then I will meet her. But to end it, not to run away. Then she walked out, never looking back. The device in Ava's hand glowed, not bright or brilliant, just a faint purple, like the last light in the sky before darkness swallowed everything. Naomi saw the light and knew what was coming. An external signal, manual activation, a primitive form of dark phase. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to calm down. The wind blew from the alley behind, carrying the rustling sound of dry leaves. The small street was completely deserted, save for two women standing less than 20 feet apart. One carried a device that could cause chaos in the area. The other carried the trust the city had placed in her. Naomi spoke, her voice even, not trembling, not raised, just as if talking to an old friend, Ava. You don't have to do that. Ava smiled, her head tilted. Beautiful, but sharp as a cut. Naomi, why do you still think you know what I want? It's been 8 years. 8 years of looking for an apology and never getting it. Naomi raised her eyes slightly. Excuse me, Ava. For what Ava sneered, a dry laugh. You really don't know, or are you pretending not to remember? 8 years ago, when Mason pushed me against the wall because I dared to defend you. Do you remember when I gave you all the data to save you from Mason? Do you remember Naomi clenched her fists? Memories she thought she had buried surfaced. An angry Mason. Ava. Blood running from her lip. She remembered. Clearly. But what made Naomi choke up was because she never knew it was all for her. Ava. You did that to protect me. Ava laughed out loud. Her voice choked. Yes, I protected you. And what did you get in return? You passed all the blame onto me. You reported it to your superiors, and they considered me a leaker. I became a traitor. Naomi, you ruined my future. Naomi shook her head quickly. Ava, no, I never reported you for cheating. I don't know who sent the data. I think Mason did it. Ava stopped, her smile gone. She gave Naomi a long look. You don't know. Naomi took a step toward her, slowly, as if afraid to break any more pieces of Ava's vulnerability. Ava, I never thought you were hurting me. I thought Mason found a way to get the data. You got dragged in. I thought you were just a victim like me. Ava's face trembled slightly. Something in her eyes felt like a small crack in glass. Not anger, but a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of hope she had long since extinguished. But just for a second, she withdrew her gaze. Then she coldly said, "It's too late." And Ava clicked to activate the device. Naomi rushed forward. Ava, no. A black wave spread out from the device like water on the road. No sound, no light, just the warping of space, causing the nearby streetlights to flicker. Naomi paused. She felt the signal pulse beneath her feet. This wasn't the full dark phase as it had been in the system. It was a crude version. Not as powerful, but enough to disrupt drone control signals within a roughly 2-block radius. Ava looked at Naomi, her voice hoarse with emotion and anger. This is what you created. Naomi, you designed the foundation of the signaling system. And now, you're going to watch it be destroyed according to the principles you built. Naomi clenched her fists. Ava, if this signal spreads, it will affect the residents, the children, the elderly. Do you want to take responsibility? Ava sneered, stepping closer. Naomi, since when did you have a choice? I've been fine for 8 years. And you disappeared from the world. Now it's my turn to know what it feels like. Naomi felt her chest tighten. You think I'm not in pain. You think I'm not looking for you, Ava. That incident haunts me every night. Ava paused, surprised. Why don't you say anything? Because I think I hurt you. Ava opened her mouth to say something, but the corners of her eyes twitched. Something had just slipped out of place, the place she had held so tightly for 8 years. But just then, a loud beep sounded behind Naomi. Elliot said urgently over the radio, "Naomi, the 2 rescue drones just lost signal. The peripheral signal is increasing. If it spreads further, the entire area will lose control of the drones." Naomi turned back to look at Ava. "Ava, you have to stop. If not, someone will get hurt." Ava shook her head. "I won't stop." Naomi took a step further. "Then let me stop." Ava stepped back, holding the device high. "Don't come any closer. Naomi, you don't know what this thing can do." Naomi pursed her lips, but she moved forward. "Ava, you know better than anyone." A gust of wind blew past. Naomi slowed down, her arms raised as if to protect herself. Ava looked at her with a mischievous look. "You think you can save me? You've gone too far. Naomi." Naomi looked deep into Ava's eyes, her voice very small. "No one goes too far to be saved." "Ava." Ava bit her lip, the hand holding the device shaking slightly. For the first time in the entire confrontation, Naomi saw genuine fear in Ava's eyes. "Not afraid of Naomi, but afraid of myself," Naomi continued. "I didn't do this because I hate you. I did it because I was hurt." Ava blinked vigorously. "Naomi, don't make me weak again." Naomi stepped forward. "You have the right to be weak. Everyone does." Ava shook her head, holding her breath. "I can't go back," Naomi replied in a broken voice. "As real as the ground after the rain? Then let me stand next to you." Ava choked. Tears fell from her eyes. But just then, the device in her hand emitted a small pop. The black signal intensified. Naomi immediately rushed forward. "Ava, drop it!" Ava panicked. I can't control it anymore." Naomi grabbed Ava's wrist, trying to push the device to the ground. The black signal jerked, alive, as if trying to fight against them both. Naomi shouted, "Let go of her." Ava burst into tears. "I don't want to do it anymore." "Naomi, I don't want to." Naomi squeezed Ava's hand, then let her go. Ava trembled. Then, in a moment, as small as a speck of dust, she let go. The device fell to the cement floor and shattered. The black wave disappeared immediately, as if it had never existed. Ava fell to her knees. Naomi followed. They were both panting, holding hands, like the last 2 people left in the world. Ava burst into tears. "Naomi, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do." Naomi hugged Ava without hesitation. "I've done enough. And you're here. You're still here." The sirens of police cars and security personnel could be heard in the distance. But in that embrace, in that moment, there were only 2 people. 2 pieces of the past finally met. "No longer running away," Naomi whispered, so softly that the night wind slowed down to hear Ava. "Let me take you home." And for the first time in years, Ava nodded. By the time the security team arrived, the signals across the area had returned to normal. No more purple glow, no more shaking of the black signal underground. All was quiet, like a sigh from the city after a brief nightmare. Naomi still held Ava. They sat in the middle of the sidewalk, where the amber light of the streetlights cast a warm, deep circle. Ava trembled in Naomi's arms, as if she had held back too much over the past 8 years and was finally allowing herself to melt. As the security team's footsteps approached, Naomi raised her head. Her eyes were not as sharp as when she fought, nor as cold as when she was used to enduring. Instead, they were tired, but steady, warm, and full of responsibility. A security officer asked quietly, "Miss Greene, is everything okay here?" Naomi nodded. "Ava needs to be taken to a mental health facility, not handcuffed, not treated like a criminal. She needs support, not punishment." The officer looked into Naomi's eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded slightly. "We understand." Naomi turned to Ava and said very softly, "You'll be fine. I promise." Ava looked at Naomi, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her voice as small as the wind in the early morning. "Naomi, thank you." Naomi squeezed Ava's hand a little. "No, thank you for letting go of the device. Otherwise, I don't dare think what would have happened." Ava lowered her head. A new tear fell, but it was no longer the painful tear of someone cornered. It was the tear of someone finally able to breathe. The security team gently guided Ava into the vehicle, which was to take her to the nearest emergency center. Naomi stood and watched until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. Only then did she feel her legs begin to tremble slightly. Elliot arrived a few minutes later, breathing heavily as if he had just run all the way from the other side of the street. When he saw Naomi standing alone in the receding darkness, he called out Naomi. She turned. Elliot stopped in front of her, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked her up and down, as if to make sure she was okay. Naomi, are you hurt? Naomi smiled tiredly. No, just a little, exhausted. Elliot sighed in relief but kept his hand on her shoulder. The core is stable. When you left, I used your instructions to keep the pace. The staff are great. They run faster than ever. Naomi chuckled. Because they trust you. Elliot looked at her, a little hesitant. No, they believe you. Naomi, tonight, you saved the city. Naomi tilted her head slightly. No, it was Ava who saved her. If she hadn't let go of the device, things would have been different. Elliot was silent for a moment. Then he asked something that surprised Naomi. Do you still trust Ava? After all, Naomi looked into the distance ahead, where the security car's lights had disappeared, leaving only the sound of the wind. She answered slowly, but surely, Elliot, sometimes the most wounded people act the worst, and sometimes all they need is someone to stay with them, not abandon them. She was talented. She was a good person. If she had the chance to come back, I believe she would. Elliot whispered, You are truly like no one else in this world. Naomi chuckled. Then I must be strange. Back in the control room, the technical team stood up when Naomi entered. Some applauded. Some sighed in relief. Some had red eyes as if they had just lived through the same nightmare as her. A young technician ran over Naomi. Are you okay? We were so worried. Naomi nodded slightly. I'm fine. And thank you, everyone. You did a great job. An older technician stepped forward, his voice sincere. Miss Greene, I've been doing signal work for almost 20 years. I've never seen anyone control the core like you. But not only that, tonight, you saved us all from panic. Naomi felt a warmth in her chest as she listened. Not with pride, but with relief. The feeling that the weight of so many years was melting away near dawn. As the crowd dispersed, Naomi left the command center and stepped onto the rooftop. Chicago, before dawn, had a strange beauty. The silver glow of the late-night lights blended with the pale purple of the sky, making the city's surface look like a sea of metal slowly heating under the first rays of sunlight. Naomi stood close to the railing, taking deep breaths of the still cool air. She thought about Ava, about Mason, about Carter, about the system she had built with all her faith, only to see it abused in ways she never imagined. And she thought about herself, about the herself of 8 years ago, about the herself of today, about the mistakes that weren't her faults, but she still carried them like a burden. A back door opened slightly. Elliot stepped out. I guess you'll be here. Naomi didn't turn around, but smiled. Everyone guessed correctly tonight. Elliot stood beside her, watching the city awaken. A long while later, he asked softly, Naomi, what are you going to do next? Naomi let out a soft breath, speaking as if to herself, I'll fix the system. No one will take advantage of it again. And I'll go see Ava when she's stable. Elliot was surprised. You will come? Naomi nodded. Ava doesn't need a judge. She needs someone to stand by her. I couldn't do that back then. Elliot looked at Naomi, his eyes filled with respect. Miss Greene, you are truly irreplaceable. Naomi smiled slightly, leaning over, the cool morning breeze brushing through her hair. Elliot, don't put me on a pedestal. I'm just a man trying to do the right thing. And hopefully, the right thing will spread further than the wrong thing. Elliot exhaled, his voice low but warm. You did the right thing, and the whole city knows it. Naomi turned to look at the dawn breaking over the horizon. The first golden light touched her face, brightening her tired but clear eyes. She said softly, as a conclusion to the long night sometimes, we all just need a chance to do it again. And today, Ava got it. Elliot looked at her, then at the sky. The dawn rose higher. The city grew brighter. And in that light, Naomi knew her journey was not over. But the pain had subsided. The burden had lightened. And hope had returned. Naomi's story is more than a story about a stolen seat or a delayed flight. It's a reflection of what many of us have experienced moments of being overlooked, misunderstood, judged based on the color of our skin, our age, our gender, or some other small detail about our appearance. From Naomi, we learn that true strength lies not in shouting, but in remaining calm. Courage is not always about moving forward. Sometimes it is about holding yourself back from being sucked into a spiral of anger. And healing comes not from retaliating, but from facing pain yours and others. Like Naomi and Ava, we all have pasts, wounds that we thought were dormant. But sometimes, just one small event is enough to awaken them all. What matters is how we choose to react. Choose love instead of hate. Choose forgiveness instead of holding ourselves to old memories. And choose to stand by each other, even when the first steps are difficult. If this story touches your heart, take a moment to think about those around you who need a word, a hug, or simply someone to listen. Thank you for staying until the end. If you love emotional and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to give me more motivation to bring more healing content.